Great. Well, welcome everyone to our session 8 of our Quality Cafe. Just a little reminder about what we are. It's a 20 to 30-minute learning session followed by question and answer. It's open to anyone interested in the topic that's being presented, and the ultimate goal is to foster networking and shared learning amongst quality professionals in Alaska. Currently trying to do this every 2 months, so our next one will be in January. These are the other 7 that we have done so far. If you want any of these recordings, just reach out to Debbie or myself and we can get those to you. All right, well, with that, I'm going to hand over control in just a second to Anna Frick. She's an epidemiologist for the state of Alaska, and she's been with them like 10 years, and she's our resident data graphing guru. And I'm just going to stop sharing so she can
Cool.
take over. Go ahead, Anna.
Thanks. Hey everyone. We are doing a sort of practical session today on using Excel. So, if you have questions, you should please just shout them out. I don't have a great ability to view the chat while I'm Excelling. And also, I feel like people could be in a lot of different places in their Excel journey. So, you know, there's no dumb questions in this particular moment. I'm willing to do whatever it is you want. If you want me to repeat a thing that I've done, please just say so, and I will do it again more slowly and explain what I'm clicking on. So, like, don't be shy at all about interrupting me. I'm going to make this window go away. Okay, so I have prepared for us some fake hand hygiene data that I might have downloaded from my hand hygiene observation collection app. So I did my observations walking around the hospital. I sent that data to myself and I have downloaded it into this spreadsheet. And this is sort of like what it looks like in its kind of raw format. And my to-do list today is I'm going to clean up this data to get it ready for analysis. That includes I need to make some stuff to do some stuff to make it easier for me to read. I also want to create a couple new variables that will make it easier for me to analyze. Then I'm going to move these data into a pivot table because that's a faster way for me to make 2 different kinds of other data shapes out of them in Excel. And then I'm going to make 2 different graphs. One's going to be a bar chart with the percent of hand hygiene by unit using the pivot table, and the other is going to be a time series with the hand hygiene by month. So that's what I'm gonna do. There's more than one way to do all of these tasks. I have a certain sort of style and process that I like to follow because I end up having to download a lot of data and process it and send out tables to lots of different people. And so I like to do things sort of the same way every time in a very reproducible way, whether I'm doing it in Excel or in a different program, so that I can sort of guess what I've done and I can try to leave myself like an easy way to figure out what I did if I need to do it again in the future or if someone asks me a question about it that is a little more technical. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all my columns and I'm going to drag them a little bit to make them wide enough so that I can see all the things that are in them. There we go. That covers about all of it. I'm probably not going to use the indication column, so I won't worry about that. The next thing that I'm going to do is I know that the 2 things that I need to do, that I plan to do with these data to are both gonna be formulas. So I guess the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom of my data and make sure I don't see anything missing. So that's good. So I'm gonna hit Control A to highlight all of the data in my table, and then I'm going to format it as a table. Um, my table does have headers, which means that the top row contains variable names. So I'm gonna leave that box checked and then click OK. There are lots of different table formats that you could have chosen. It does not matter in the slightest which you choose, except if you have color preferences. This isn't going anywhere. It just has to be formatted as a table to get turned into a pivot table, and also because it will make it easier for me to do some like repetitive formula actions here in a second. So I've just picked like an arbitrary formatting type that works for me. Now, my date variable is all organized by single day, right? And that's not that helpful to me. I probably want to analyze this data by month because I don't have very much of it. So I'm going to go back to my home tab. I'm going to insert a new column. I'm going to check the column format type right here. You can see it says custom. That happens a lot if you insert columns like this. So I'm going to reformat it to the general one. And that means that now it will behave normally and not try and apply any weird formatting to the data that I enter. I'm going to name this column month. And then I'm going to use the month formula applied to my date variable to get the month out of that. So when I do this, since I have formatted these data as a table, it will automatically apply that same formula to every cell in that column. So as we look here, we can see that it successfully identified these observations from August as being in month 8, these observations from September as being in month 9, and these observations from November as being in month 11. So, oh, and these ones down here that were August, they're also in 8. Great, perfect. So that worked great. Now I have a month variable. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a variable that I call my count variable. And I checked, see, and I clicked in here, and this one is formulated as the general. That's good. I'm going to just add the formula here equals 1. So when I do that, it will just fill in every cell in this column with the number 1. And the reason I do that is because it makes it a little easier for me to make Excel do some counting and averaging tasks later and for it to be like more traceable. Sometimes when you ask Excel to do things about it can be hard to tell what it did because Excel is kind of opaque in its behavior. And making sure that I have one variable here that has a value of 1 means that I always have a place I can go where Excel will tell me the number of things that are currently being used. And that'll make more sense in a second when we move to the pivot table. So that was my initial data cleaning tasks that I wanted to do. There's some other stuff I could do if I planned to do more fancy things, but this is probably enough for us to get started. Does anybody have any questions about the sort of cleaning data step?
I already learned 4 new short. Thank you, Anna.
All right, cool. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to insert and then hit pivot table. When I do that, it will ask me what data I'm going to make into a pivot table. Um, Excel has a naming convention for things that are official tables, so it has named this one table 1, which is fine with me, but it's something to pay attention to. If for some reason you have several tables or you've had to untable and then reformat as a table, it might have a different name and it's worth just noticing that. I do want my pivot table to be in a new worksheet. I usually do want to do that, so that's what I'm going to do. So now I have a pivot table in here. Pivot tables are a nice function that Excel does if you've never used one. It lets you sort of squish data around in lots of different directions in a sort of like a more point and click kind of way than if you had to keep reformatting it um, in with other methods. So the first thing I usually do, or if have we all used pivot tables before? Is this basically familiar to everyone?
Yes.
All right, cool. Then I won't explain all of these things. I, generally speaking, almost always take my count variable and immediately make that what Excel is going to be counting for me. So now I know that every time, because I've defined my count variable so that they're all ones, I know that every time Excel creates tables for me that are showing me the number of count that are there, it is the number of items in my data that meet those criteria. So if I were to then create my, um, I've got my months and I've got my, um, and I've got my whether or not people wash their hands indicator. I know that what this means is that in the month of August, there were 3 observations where the person didn't perform hand hygiene and 15 observations where the person used hand sanitizer. And I know that that's exactly what's in those data. I don't have to fuss about other things. I could create a similar result like this um by or if I in other ways, like I can do it this way and then I want to change I'd have to change the value field setting here to be something different. But I find it's like usually harder to figure out what Excel is doing in those situations, so I prefer to sort of just leave count here all the time and then move my other variables around to make new tables for myself. All right, so I'm going to copy these data out and I'm going to put them over here. And I'm going to write a note to myself that this is HH compliance by month so that I know what 8, 9, and 11 stand for. It's kind of obvious what 8, 9, and 11 stand for, but since October didn't have any observations and it's sort of like then I'm missing, I want to make sure I like leave a note for myself so I know what it is. Um, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is I probably want to know the percent of compliance that I have. So I'm gonna create a new variable over here, a new column. I'm gonna say this is gonna be percent compliance. And then I'm going to say that the percent compliance is equal to the rubs plus the washes divided by the total number of observations that I have. I'm going to copy that and paste it into my other spots, and then I'm going to format them as a percentage. And now I have my first sort of piece of data that I plan to create. I'm also going to relabel this month, actually, that's probably efficient. So, um, one thing that I guess so we'll do this here and then you can see how it looks. I've highlighted the data that I want to include and now I am going to insert a time series. Excel is mad at me for 2 reasons. One is that it sometimes gets mad when you have data that isn't touching each other that you try to get it to include in something. And then the other reason it's going to get mad is because I've left October off the thing entirely. So this graph didn't turn out the way I wanted to. I might just make a new one over here. So maybe what I'll do instead is I will move this down and then I'll put 10 in here and I'll just put zeros in. I'll put an NA here because there weren't any observations. And I'm going to relabel these as months. And now I'm going to remake my time series. There we go. And that time it went much better because Excel found that to be a much more workable package of data. If it had done some kind of a weird thing, I could fix it by going to by right-clicking and then going to select data. And then in this area, I can sort of force it to change things around and move what goes where. Now, one thing I'm thinking about doing, I want to leave October in there, but I might want to remove that data. Like, I'm not super happy with how it's chosen to show a 0 instead of an NA there. So let's see if I make that blank. That's not what I wanted you to do. That's very odd. So I can do that. Let's see, I could put 0 in there. What I might decide to do is to either figure out well, the first thing I probably do is figure out where my October data is since I should have probably collected some. I might choose to add a marker here that will say there's actually no data collected there. So I could insert a text box. Here we go. Oops, it went away. All right, my text box didn't turn out super well, so we'll do that. And I'll place it down here. And that will work for me for right now. Um, in the future, so if I want to not include that spot at all, I can make 2 lines, and I could also switch us to a different chart type that's Excel is happier about, like, having not connecting lines for. Like, if I make this a bar chart, it will be much less grumpy about that missing piece of data. But I had sort of planned to make a bar chart for my unit type, so I'll do that way instead. So I've gone back to my pivot table. Once you click inside the pivot table, then you can um, automatically, it will sort of open up its little menu bar for you. If this ever closes, you can get it back from the view window and in the pivot table one as well. Um, so I switched out from my rows being months to my rows being location, and now I've got my new little table here. So I'm gonna copy it out and put it down here. I'm just gonna actually copy my percent formulas right over here since they're pretty much the same anyway. And I'll cross check it. So it's telling me the cell numbers of what's in there, but if you click on it up here, then it will highlight them for you. And so that's telling me that it is doing what I expected it to do, which is always good. If you copy and paste in Excel, usually it guesses right about what you want it to do. But sometimes it makes weird formula choices. So I always check what it did. All right. So now I'm going to relabel this unit. And I'm going to highlight my 2 packages of data, and I'm going to go back to the insert menu. And in this case, I'm going to choose to display this as a bar chart because I have categorical data here on my x-axis. And so a bar chart would be the right way to display this data. Or, I mean, this is a column chart, I guess, but you could do any of these things that are sort of shaped like a large rectangle would be the right choice for this one. Um, I would also, if we were to talk more, I've talked with you guys a lot about sort of display before, so I'd probably want to go back through and change my title names and stuff, but otherwise I've sort of basically met my obligations here. If I decide that I'm not happy with how I have one of my things labeled with an abbreviation and one of my other units sort of written out long form, I could change this. So I could change it to, and then it would automatically change itself. Um, so in this case, I would definitely want to make sure that I included my time here. So I would put percent and hygiene. Oops. And this is August through November 2024. So I know what data is in here and people don't assume that this is any other time interval. I could do a lot of other visualizations, but those are sort of 2 basic ones that I figure people might want to do on the regular. Do we have any questions about that? Okay, cool. That's convenient. I guess I'm glad I have crushed my explanation. So let me go back to my to-do list. I did all the things that I had expected to do on my list today, so I don't have anything else super specifically planned. If I were exploring these data more, I could look through some of the other things that I collected information on. Like I have indications here. I could make charts by indications. Um, Maybe that's a good one for us to do actually. So my hand hygiene compliance was, I don't know, it was never great. The best it ever was 84% in August, and that's not like super good. So maybe I'm interested in knowing more about um what's going on with that? Like where are the misses happening? So I could do that in lots of ways. One way I could start to check it out would be to put hand hygiene compliance here in the filters section and then switch it to just the missed observations. So now it's only showing me the places where I made mistakes, which because this data is set is very small, is not very sort of a little bit silly. And then I could look at sort of my indications here. So, I can see a couple different things. So, it looks like roughly I saw the same like number of mistakes in my three different units. But when I compare this, it looks like the thing that I saw people were missing the most was pretty clearly the after patient or patient environment contact, which, knowing how I collected these observations probably means I saw a lot of people walking out of a room. I was probably doing ins and outs, and I saw people sort of leaving patient rooms without any sign of performing hand hygiene. So that's pretty clear. Even in this small set of data, I think it's probably a noticeable finding that um, half of my missed observations were for um, a place were for the sort of after the outs movement. So that might be then something I could follow up on. Um, that would probably be one of my next steps. Although with only the like 30 or so observations that I collected for these data, my big goal would be to go collect more data. That's not really enough information to sort of make whole statistical inferences on. Okay, that's kind of what I had prepared for you guys. I was assuming that people would have some questions for me. So does anyone have any questions, or are there other things you would like me to show you how to do?
Anna, could you show how to like adjust your axes in either one of your
Um,
charts?
yeah, sure. Like in what way?
Like to change the range, like you've got,
Oh,
0
sure.
to 99 in there, or how to make changes in there, because I think that's important. Some people don't understand how to do that.
Yeah.
I know yours
So
makes
there,
sense because they do now, but
yeah, these ones are fine, but if for some reason I wanted to change them, there are a couple ways to get to the menu to change it. My default choice is usually to click on the axis and double click it. And that will open up the format chart area option. If you click on the axis, it will bring you to the axis zone. The one that's got the juicy stuff in it is the one that has the little icon shaped like a bar chart. There in access options, I can choose lots of different things. So it's representing percents here as they're sort of like between 0 and 1 values. So if I wanted to change that, like I this is slightly improbable just because of that it like did a decent job here, but maybe I want it to go to 100%, right? So then I could just put 1 here. So now I've done that. Um, 10% marks are pretty reasonable, but they are kind of close together. So maybe I'll have it switch those to 20% marks. That seems like a little less crowded. That looks all right to me. I think I'm okay with that change. Um, I am likely to turn grid lines off. So having done that, I could add data labels in. You can get to this chart elements thing. That's the plus sign there. Um, and if I want to add my axis titles, that's where I'll do that as well. So in this case, I don't actually think that the primary horizontal axis is doing me any work, but I'll leave vertical on there. And so I could rename this to say pro proportion. Or whatever else I feel like calling. I've decided is conventional to call that in my presentations. Um, Sometimes the Excel likes to do real weird stuff with its axes. And it's trying to do usually that stuff is happening either in the axis options or in the number section. Um, So those are the two places to look if you feel like Excel is trying to do you dirty in some sort of weird axis related way. It's worth checking in there. If we look at the axis options for the line chart, they are slightly different. Um, but they're like mostly similar. If these weren't percent data, then it would have some other options here. So like you can tell it to knock it off with decimal places and stuff. Its default is to do that for percents, but if I had not made these data like formatted them as percent, then it wouldn't know they were percents, and so it would probably be showing me a bunch of decimal points there, and I could make that go away here. Um Can't see that. That's rude.
While you're
Go.
right in there, if you could show how to change the colors. Yeah, it's my favorite
Yes.
thing.
All right. So, I probably don't want to change the color of like my writing. Let's do this one because I already made it bigger. So, I'm here. I'm here. I've got my format chart area menu still open. When I click on the data, it will bring me to this zone. Um, which is the sort of series options. The paint can, as is conventional, is where I can change my colors. I don't since this one isn't like a particularly complicated chart, like I don't have like a strong reason to change them to a different thing, but maybe I'm expecting this to be sort of like a black and white presentation, so I'm just going to make them all black. Um oh, sorry, I'm in the border section here, so just gave them black borders. Let's go up to fill, and then I can change I can change the fill color there to nice black ones. Um I could, if I wanted to, potentially change them each to different colors, but in this case, that doesn't make sense to do because it's not sort of like the style of bar graph that it is. Um, and if this wasn't, or if I made like, so if I changed this one to a column chart, yes, that's what I told you to do. So in this case, because these times become really close together, it's, like, not appropriate to have giant gaps between them. In this graph showing the proportion by unit, the gaps make sense because they represent sort of discrete populations, but there's not like a meaningful in like the real world, the difference between August and September is just an artificial construct that humans made up. It doesn't actually mean anything. And August and September like sort of directly touch each other, right? And so in that case, what I'm really doing here is making a histogram. And so I want to bring my graphs much closer together. Um, because I don't want to like overemphasize that sort of fake temporal gap. I want to say that these things are similar. I, generally speaking, am likely to just use a line chart for this instead, but the old boss man does make me make histograms on the regular, and that is a real pet peeve. You got to make these gaps become quite close together. If you bring them really close together, then that's fine. Or you can also like set the gap width to 0 and then give them a white border and you'll sort of have achieved the same result. So I guess we could do that here for science. Doink. Now you can see that's there. But I'm going to change that back to a time series because I just deeply prefer to present temporal data as a line. Oh, and now I made it real mad because I made it white. So I better change that back, make it black. Um, Other things that you guys would like to talk about, I can also do, um, I don't know what would be helpful to you. Feel free to make requests, but I have pretty decent Excel skills with formulas as well. So if you want me to like do some formula stuff, we can do that too.
We did have a request to review the pivot table stuff,
Sure.
but since it's 12:30, I thought maybe we'd finish out the slide presentation and then come back to pivot if that works for you, Anna. If you could stop sharing, and then if
Yeah,
people want to
man.
stay on to kind of get the pivot table basics, maybe that would be the best. share my screen and go back to my slideshow. So thank you, Anna, for that overview. We do have the slides that we'll give you, and you can get the recording as well. And then we do have some data for you to practice with. So you can follow Anna along watching the recording to get the skills built up in yourself. And if you want to hear more about what Anna's presented to us in the past, if you missed it or just want to hear it again, in April at our Quality Summit, Anna presented data from 1 to 1,000 charts on the table, and it was very informative. And so I have that recording and the slides, which you'll get when you get this slide deck from that. And that is all we have for this part. Does anyone have any other question? There were a couple of things showing up in the chat, and if you want to look at that. Otherwise, our next Quality Cafe is going to be in January, and we're still working on the topic for that. So if you have anything you'd like to have presented to present, reach out to myself. And if you have any further questions for Anna after we're done today, you feel free to email me or Debbie, and we can forward those on to her. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and jump it back to Anna so she can show us some pivot table basics. And it looks like Jay posted about count if functions. Those are my favorite as well. People want to stay on for more. We have the hour blocked, so we can just keep working through questions. And I think we'll keep the recording on since this might be valuable for others. So Anna, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, so the first thing was to show you how I do the pivot table thing again. There's more than one way to do it. Usually the easiest way is to have data that you've already formatted as a table and then to have it sort of make that into a table. It'll take me forever to sort of undo my way through this, so I'm gonna make another sort of miniature fake table over here. So we're gonna just say this is variable X, this is variable Y, and here it's 1, 2, 3. There we go. And this will be. So I'm going to format this as a table. There we go. And now when I go to insert, the insert option up here in the ribbon, if I click pivot table, I know that it's got this one over here because it's highlighted in green and because it's named table 2. I know that's the second one that I made. So then it'll open in a new worksheet, tell it okay, and now it has made me a new thing. So there we go. It has made me a new, very dumb little table. So that's how you do that one. Do you want me to show you again? I can substantially more easily undo my way through that one if you want.
I'm thinking if you could maybe just go back to your pivot table and maybe explain those 4 boxes and what they are.
Sure. Okay, let's use my real pivot table because it's easier with stuff in it. So, when you're using pivot tables, there are lots and lots of tutorials about this. So feel free to get this from a person who is credentialed as a pivot table and or Excel expert and not me. But essentially, it's trying to let you move data around with just your mouse instead of how we would conventionally do that, which involves formulas and or formally reorganizing the data in the table. So there's a menu section up top here, which has a list of all of the columns in your data. Excel, generally speaking, thinks about your data as being organized in such a way that a row represents a line of data and not a column. You can, of course, organize data in either way, but Excel's inclination is to think about it as one row is one item of data. So it takes your column names and it puts them in here, which is also sort of like when I had the pivot table set up from something that was already formatted as a table, I had already told it that those headers were my variable names. So it took them in here. And so all my variable names are accessible to me here. And then this little fourplex down here is where I can have it do different, where I tell it what I want to go where. The one that's labeled filters is where I currently have hand hygiene compliance. And so if I want to only see a subset of my data, that's what this is for. If I want to just take a subset. So I have it set now to only show me the data where people missed their hand hygiene. I could switch it now. It will only show me the subset of data where people used hand sanitizer. So that's what that one's for. The columns and rows, I think, are kind of self-evident, but that's where you tell it which variable you want to go there. Maybe it's easier to think about. Let me take this one out. So what it's going to do is what I've told it is for my pivot table, I want the columns to show me what's an indication. So it's taken all of the values that indication can have in these data, and it has laid them out for me as different columns. And then the little thing here with the sigma that says values, that is asking me to tell it like what data do you want to put in there. And I've taken my variable count, which has a value of 1 for all rows of data, and I've placed it in there. So now it's telling me the number, the sum of all of the counts for that. So what it's saying is that there are um the variable count, which has a value of 1 for everything. When we add up the variable of count in all places where the indication is after patient contact, there were 16 of those. Um, so that's, and then if I were to add similarly a row column here, now it's telling me that the number of times where in the month of August, the hand sanitizer was used after patient contact was 11. You can change this. So I usually, because its default is pretty much always to use the sum of whatever thing is there. Um, that's part of the reason that I like to use my sort of fake count variable. If I change it to count, you'll see that it does the exact same thing because it's counting count. But if I were to change the value field to show me the average, it'll say 1 for all of them because they all have a value of 1. So the average of a bunch of ones is 1. So you can get the pivot table to do more work for you using these options. But like you can use that sort of count thing if you don't want to create a fake counter marker for all of your data, but that's like sort of my process is to do that so that I don't have to worry as much about making sure I click all of these things. Does that work for everybody? Do we have any more questions about that?
Not seeing anything come in on that. So I don't know if you saw Jay's challenge question.
I did see that one. So, I usually speaking, if I need to do a bunch of count ifs, I'm gonna move out of Excel because Excel I can make a really long nested COUNTIF function, but the more of those that I do, the more likely it is that Excel is going to do something weird along the way. And so I'm quite likely to shift my data to a program that's better at that kind of stuff. Also, I don't color code because color coding is nice for people who are looking at something with their eyes, but that's not a good way for doing data analysis. So Excel has ways for you to do this, but like I prefer not to use them because I think that Excel is likely to try to make my life more difficult if I do that. So you can do stuff like this. So like that's what Excel's conditional formatting is for, is to do stuff where it does intentional highlighting for you. So like I can apply rules, format cells. Let's see. This is not a great data set to do this in, but maybe I guess we do it over here. So I can do like if I want to format cells that are greater than 9.5, sure. So now Excel has found all of my 11s and has turned them that color for me. Um, if that's something that is useful to you, you are welcome to do things like that. It just, broadly speaking, isn't usually useful to me. I'm gonna make it go away. Um, if you want, I don't think I've ever actually asked it to count things that I had colored before, because that's like literally a question. I have taken a stats exam where someone was like, that was like a question on it was like, you ask a student to like parse all these data for you and to categorize them. And then like they hand you this result. Is this good or not? And they show you like a lovely, like visually organized one by color. Um, again, it works great if you want someone to look at this table. So like if I was like, if this one, instead of saying like a successful, this is a missed observation, right? And um, maybe like, and then they stabbed the patient. And I was like, I would like to show this as like a real weird incident that happened. I could highlight this as like, this one was really bad. This one went very badly. And that's very helpful for helping everyone pick that one out of a lineup. Um, yeah, so it has a place. Let's see. I see a question. If I was going to do this in a different program, where would I move to? That's a great question. I used to be mostly a SAS user, and I've been switching to R recently because another field that I do a lot of work in is very much an R community, and so I get more help and borrow more people's code in R. So that's what I'm likely to do. If I need a free program that doesn't have a lot of coding expectations, then I'm potentially going to use Epi Info, which is something that CDC wrote to have. It does sort of like your basic data management and analysis functions. So Epi Info is pretty easy to use and available. Um, if
Looks like
I, yeah,
looks
what's
like
up?
Jay gave you a thumbs up on
Which
that.
is my answer is
I
that
like
I
to say
wouldn't do
that
that way.
if you're wanting to count something conditionally formatted, then you could probably figure out why conditional formatting was using count from that. So instead of trying to count all the reds. But that would be how I would approach that.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually want to do this in here, but
Anyone have any other questions?
if you're wondering, the way COUNTIF works is that you tell Excel, so let's see, these data are pretty small and like pretty uniform, so it's not like the most useful thing that I would do here. But like, let's say that um I want to know, like I want to know how many of these are long-term care, which because so the easiest way for me to answer that question is just to sort this, right? And then to say, oh, look, here are all the ones that are long-term care. If I highlight them like this, Excel will show me in the bottom that there are 18 of them. I could also do this and I could say, okay, so that's these rows for, and then my count variable will also show me that there are 18 of them. So that's probably like the quickest way to do that. But if these data were like larger or more complicated or had sort of other reasons to care, I could use COUNTIF to or I'm trying to think of like an example that would be useful for this. Maybe I'm just completely idly curious to know how many cells in here. Oh, here's a good one. So how many of these involve gloves? Or so I've highlighted that. And then ooh, COUNTIF gets mad if you do text searches, doesn't it?
You just have to put in quotations.
Yeah, that's right. So it didn't find any of those, which is, I guess none of these only
Which
include
you
the
have to
word
put
gloves.
gloves, not
So,
glove. Yeah, put an S on it.
no, that shouldn't work because that's not how strings work. In this case, it's probably because they're not, because like if I search the word prior, it still won't find those, right? Like, it's because it's a string problem. So if I were going to do that, what I would actually do instead would be to do, search is and then I would use like this combo of functions to look for just the string that I'm interested in. And then I could nest this inside my oh, and then I would need that to be and then I gotta close this bad boy up. Oop. And I forgot search has another one. Search I want to find is where I should be. There we go. No, now it's mad. Anyway, I haven't used that function in a while because I moved the report that I used to have to use it for into a different program. I moved it to R, so that I would have to do this less. But the combo, if you want to look for strings, is you want to use the interaction of the search and isNumber functions. Anyway, anything else people want to talk about?
Seeing anything else in the chat? Anyone have anything else? You can put it in the chat or unmute and post your question. Okay, so we will send the recording to everyone on the call with the practice data. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to one of us and we will connect you with Anna to get your questions answered. Thank you so much for coming on today, Anna. This has been great. And thank you everyone for hanging out.